Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. DebatePhysics.com also. And such. So we'll play a little bit of this spinning levers video, and then we'll go to Ian Gosling's argument, and then Julius Sumner, something like that. And I'll just, add what's called the, true context. I probably should correct the volume in the appropriate manner. It's always these little details.
Meet Mr. Archimedes of ancient Greece. Long ago, Archie said,
"Give me a lever long enough, and I can move the world."
What Archimedes meant was that the power of a lever is practically unlimited.
And its power is just in conversion. It doesn't add any energy. It doesn't subtract any energy. It just converts something, velocity and mass. It changes the momentum into another form of momentum in terms of you can have force that's applied very quickly versus force that is continuous and protracted, that kind of thing. But that's all it does, is convert one form of the energy, mass and velocity into another form of mass and velocity. But it's an equal amount of total quantity of motion. So again, I'll just say that's what they called it 300 years ago, and I didn't think it was a very articulate statement in the past, but the more I see what people are doing to things, the more clear it is in terms of it is a substance. Energy is a property at minimum, and there's only so much of this property in the universe, and it just moves from one object to another object, and you cannot create more of the property or less. You can't destroy it, and you can't make it. You have to just transfer it.
Today, almost everyone uses some form of lever in his daily work. The familiar can opener is a lever.
It looks quite horrible, right? Like all these little metal pieces flying off, and you're just saying, gee, how much of that did I eat?
With a sharp cutting edge. The playground seesaw is just a simple lever too.
That's a pretty weird configuration. Kids with the arms behind him, not a brilliant idea. But obviously you had to change the weight distribution for it to work. The heavier kid did have to move forward. The lighter kid has to move back, or it don't work. But there's no, oh, what a hideous waste of energy, because, gee, half the energy is lost, blah, 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 blah.
It takes a lot of force to start a freight car moving. Yet, the railroad man can start the heaviest freight cars easily with a pinch bar, a powerful lever which turns the wheel. Tough luck.
I have to get me one of those.
Old boy. Here's a place where
This looks so rickety. You're just like, oh shit, somebody's gonna get under that car.
a lever comes in mighty handy. Let's take the simplest kind of lever.
Alright, so, this is where it gets to the interesting part for our discussion. So this is the classical fulcrum, the little point at the end. That's the idea, and the broad base to keep it all stable.
Lever. A rigid bar working on a fixed support called a fulcrum. One end of this lever is twice as long as
I don't believe that's 10 pounds, frankly. The way he lifted it up and such, it just seems way too light, but whatever. Maybe they're just doing this for theater. Maybe it's 5 pounds, but whatever. Doesn't matter. The theory is the same.
the other. Let's put a 10-pound weight on this end, and now we'll put half as much weight on this end.
Notice that the weights are on top of the lever. That's where they're pushing, is on top of the lever. So this was my point, that Ian Gosling's argument fails in the sense that if I do hang them from the top of the lever, it does balance appropriately and it doesn't just spin and all of that crap.
5 pounds balance 10. If we have 25 pounds to lift, we just use a longer lever. The 5 pounds will now balance 5 times as much. Let's raise the lever in the...
Okay, so obviously they didn't say anything about, gee, but it's going to lose a ton of kinetic energy and blah, 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 and include any of that part. All right, so here's the fulcrum is now being moved instead of putting different weights on. So you're basically creating different weights by having a different amount of lever on the two sides.
Air, change its shape a little, and we have a crank. Or we can add a second.
Yeah, crank. All right, so this is just where it's getting to the point where it's just showing that these levers, okay, are basically the dynamic for something like gears.
Lever and have a double crank. Now the short arm moves.
So it's really just more conversion. You're just converting a mass and velocity, a distance you're moving in a time. You're changing the distance you're moving in the time, and the force, the torque, changes commensurate to the distance change, and blah, 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 blah. So this is a perfect conversion, I think. Right? Because you're going from small to large back to this small one, I think.
1/4 the distance, but we get 4 times the...
So 1/4 the distance 4 times. No 8 times, no 16 times. None of that crap.
force. If we want continuous motion, we need more arms. Now we have levers that turn. The larger paddle wheel...
Not a bad animation for the 50s. Anyway, they went to some work to do this. Unfortunately, modern physics can't create these kinds of models and explanations. So you have to go all the way back to the 50s to get 1936. I mean, damn. This is really old. It's pretty good for something that old.
Makes fewer turns.
It's incredibly good. I mean, I can't. 1936. I think they got that wrong. I mean, this is too good a video for 1936. It's got to be 56.
But it delivers more force. A paddle wheel is nothing but a never-ending series of levers. We can make the wheels stronger and lessen friction where the wheels touch each other by rounding off the edges and shaping them into teeth that will slide in and out smoothly. Now, the power flows smoothly and continuously.
Right? They don't say anything about, but we lose 1/4, we lose half, we lose 3/4, we lose all tons of... Every time I do this transition from a big gear to a small gear, all of a sudden I'm losing tons and tons of energy. Or, in the other case, I'm gaining all kinds of free energy.
Through spinning leverage of gear wheels. Gears are made in many kinds and many sizes. Little gears, big gears, worm gears, bevel gears, and even lopsided gears.
And it doesn't say anything about the fact that they all suck at conserving the momentum. No, they kind of imply that they do it very well.
Over 100 million gears are spinning over the roads.
Alright, so that's the end, and the rest of it's just about the transmission. I don't know if I'll go through that because it doesn't really have anything to do with the subject, except when he talks about how the torque is conserved, essentially. And so maybe we'll come back for that. So I will go to the Ian Gostling. So you saw the part where the weights are hanging off the top of the lever, right? I shouldn't have to re-show that, but just in case you didn't notice, the weight is being hung from the top of the lever. Alright. Yeah, so that's the context. And where am I going here? I'm drifting around. Did I turn this on? Yeah. Okay, you saw that. I had to make sure of that too. The whole thing's just getting so tedious. Yeah, here we are. Alright, so here's his new video, Force X Arm, whatever that means. So he says a bunch of crap Alright, so I have to debunk that. That won't be on the subject, but anyway, we'll just play the video.
Just a quick bit about.
So we'll slow it down because he has some little crappyisms to spew. So we'll do his little crappyisms. We have to turn the volume up and such.
About scales before I start. It did make me laugh, Gary, because when you used to say, oh, you dropped a mass on the scales and it weighed an amount, and then you would drop it from 4 times the height to get twice the.
Yeah, I don't know why that's laugh worthy. To me, it's a fundamental part of understanding the dynamics of motion in the universe, and why regular physics hasn't paid any attention to the concept of weight, and the fact that when everything hits anything, what it's really doing is transferring a weight. The pressure is a weight.
Speed, and it would weigh twice the amount, twice the speed, twice the weight, used to say, and used to proclaim it quite confidently.
Yeah, and where are you going to debunk it anywhere with anything that means anything? Oh, that's right, you're not. So again, what's the point of you putting this in your video? Different subject, frankly, and you're not going to provide any insights into how it's not twice the velocity, twice the pressure, twice the capacity to push something, twice the capacity to put energy or motion into something. That's exactly how it works.
And I thought, well, it's a terrible idea doing that, because scales,
It's a terrible idea to drop a weight on a scale. So again, this doesn't make any sense. Exactly why is this a terrible thing? Why is dropping a weight, a mass, on a spring, and then seeing how much the spring moves, how is that not a perfectly reasonable energy detection experiment? Why wouldn't I do it? What happens to the poor universe when I do this? Oh, that's right, nothing damaging. You just get enlightened on the fact that that's what energy is. It's a mass and a velocity. It's a momentum hitting another object. The momentum moves the spring, compresses it or expands it.
I didn't think you'd be able to. The dial would vibrate. You wouldn't be able to read them.
I showed how. Sure, you can read them. You just need a good enough camera, or you can create actually devices like Stephen Bro. You could put a little bit of crap on there, a little bit of mushy crap, and the scale will smash the mushy crap, and the amount that's left, it'll show you the maximum number. That's what you want. You want to see the maximum compression or expansion. That's telling you what the actual complete use of the momentum was. The momentum came in. The 100-pound man runs into the tackling dummy or some other mechanism. You want to see how far it pushes before it runs out of energy.
Unless you had a very slow-mo camera. And I thought it was a terrible idea. But
yeah, this is just, who cares? Okay, you think it's a terrible idea. I think it's essential to understanding physical dynamics in the universe is colliding things and recognizing how much the collision actually has in it. Putting the spring between the two 50-mile-an-hour cars. One spring between the two cars will tell you what the real impact of the collision is.
But then I thought, so I suggested that instead of measuring the 4 times the energy,
which again, this isn't a very articulate put together of words, so, but whatever. I'm just measuring the energy. We are debating whether it's 4 times or 2 times. That's what's under debate. You think a twice compressed spring is 4 times the energy, even though I can't make any sense out of that at all.
what if we dropped one mass from one height, and then, by your theory, if we dropped to half a mass at twice the velocity,
Yes, the same momentum. My theory is that momentum works. That Galileo, Descartes, and Newton all thought momentum works, and there was really provided to them no evidence that momentum doesn't work. Realistically, they won the argument 350 years ago, and then a bunch of fancy pantses, decided to play. The rich people decided to play with physics and invented their own special living force physics. La 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 la. And that's what you're defending. Dropping round things into clay and rolling objects in gravitational force. Clearly, when you roll the object and it's only in the gravity twice as long, it can only have collected twice as much opposition force. But you ignore those facts to continue to be an asshole.
Mass at one velocity and half mass at twice velocity, they should weigh the same.
Yes, that's exactly correct. That's the assertion. And where in this video are you going to prove otherwise? Oh, that's right, you're not going to prove otherwise. Ugh, you stupid shit.
Which is what this bar started to do. And they were showing a difference.
Let's understand, he's done 4 experiments doing that, and he's got numbers kind of all over the place. So, bravo.
Which is correct, because of the kinetic energy. Now you complained about the scales, and now he's got an...
No, I talked about the fact that it is an engineering question. And the fact is that scales sometimes aren't directly a spring, okay? They have a mass at one end and a mass at the other end, and these masses are moving while the spring is compressing, which is obviously going to change what you're going to see in terms of the compression of the spring. There are real concepts called dampening. These aren't fake concepts. They're real. Jesus, you're just such a... people are just so obnoxious. You have no evidence confirming your theory. That is, you can't just keep playing the great videos of you showing it taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, and you showing the 8-pound bowling ball wiping out those bowling pins. You don't have anything to show me, and yet you're so fucking arrogant.
Nice new set of scales, and he's going to do the experiments better. All of a sudden now you're...
I'm what? I'm waiting, okay? And I'm, again, pausing because just like you and just like Brozo, Dispar only cares to confirm his crap, okay? And he doesn't do the experiment. He doesn't care about quick releases or this or that or any of these other details. So he'll spend more money on a new scale, but he probably won't spend any time actually thinking about whether he's got some other way to measure the velocities to make sure he's actually creating twice the velocity.
You're complaining about that it is a bad idea to do it on scales because they don't then...
I didn't complain about it. I didn't say that at all. I just said if I was going to do it, I would get one of those fisherman weigh your fish kind of scales. I get a scale that was really simple, as much like just a plain spring as possible. A quality spring with some sort of mechanism that controls how the spring compresses so you can get some kind of consistency out of it and you can read it, and even something that locked. I mean, like that gear had a lock on it, the gear in the video. That would be helpful.
Not designed to read impact energy. And it quite...
Yeah, they're not. But that doesn't mean you can't. I'm just saying his was obviously a big difference between a scale, this little cruddy one that I used, all right, and one that's configured this way. Okay, this is a little bit of a problem when you're hitting the giant surface and the small weight is the one that's stable. That is a little bit of a problem in terms of recognizing that this whole mass has to also be given the momentum. And now you're back into problems of reflection, and you're back into the difference between pushing and hitting. You want to try to make the contact into a push, not a hit. I mean, these are real physics concepts. You don't think so? It just shows you're an asshole. I mean, it's a real concept. The difference between push and pull, the difference between hitting and pushing. These are real things. They're not fake things. Shit. He just pretends there are no variables here that need to be carefully understood.
Funny how you sort of change your tune.
So there was no changing of any fucking tunes. This is just such a lie. I just pointed out his scale was the most bizarre looking piece of shit I ever saw as a scale. But I said, yes, if all you want to do is weigh something and you don't want impact to be important, well, then that's the scale to use. But yes, if you're going to do an impact measurement, that's not the scale you want to use. That's all I fucking said, retard.
Suits you. Anyway.
They're just such lying scum. Ugh. I didn't take back anything. They're all pretending like they've done all of this scale analysis somewhere in their past, that they actually spent a time reading a book on scale dynamics, and they're all fucking experts on how scales work. No, I'm not an expert. I didn't watch the Fred Flintstone episode that talked about how scales work. All right, so yeah, all of this is sort of a learning curve thing. And the fact is, I never really thought about it. And then when I did think about it, I'm thinking, yes, what you want are the fewest parts possible, because all you're really trying to do is measure the compression of a spring. And you're trying to do that in a way where the spring doesn't bend or do some other kind of stupid shit to ruin your experiment. Fucking asshole.
I couldn't wait to show.
That's why I sort of talked about using the spring with the lever, because that's it's kind of a good mechanism.
Show you this because when I did my thing about hanging weights from the lever on the drawing, and you said, "Oh, that's no good. That doesn't work."
Yeah, and I pointed out why. Okay, in practice, I don't see how it's possible that this has to do with this theory of his. Because in the one configuration it doesn't work, and clearly it's about the masses being below the fulcrum. That's what makes the difference. Okay, so if you hang them from the top, you're okay. If you put them on the top, you're not okay. That's the difference. Okay, so it really doesn't have anything to do with his theory. It has something to do with the masses being above the center of the gravity or below its center of gravity. So I'll play the Julius Sumner center of gravity frickin' video, even though it is a little bit boring. Because frankly, that's the relevant function. That's the controlling mechanism here, and it's not as you theorize.
It's correct.
It's not even that you theorize, you pontificate. Yeah. Like I said, I didn't even mind the concept. I was making the same sort of argument, saying it has something to do with this, but how much of this mass is turned, and the position of the center of mass as you rotate, and all of that is reasonable stuff. But you're talking as if you know the truth. You don't. You're just using your reasoning skills to say, that's what I observe. But again, as I pointed out, the catch is it doesn't work for both surfaces. And it does work, hanging things from both surfaces does work. So obviously there's something wrong with your theory. And certainly as I described it, I never talked about placing weights on top. I talked about hanging the weights.
It does predict what happens whether you hang the weight from the bottom of the bar or
So he said hang the weight again, okay, when he's not going to hang the weight. He's going to do an example where he's not going to hang the weight. He's going to put the weight.
Top. Wouldn't matter. Does predict what would happen. It's correct. I've done this because I think it shows it better rather than a picture.
Well, I think the picture could be drawn. So yes, the wider you make it, as long as people understand you're just talking about the width of the lever itself. And then you can see how the weight of the lever itself is distributed as it rotates. And that's helpful. And then you can add the masses and see how that changes the configuration of the mass, the center of mass of the lever. But as I pointed out, it doesn't diagram very well, because if you do assume that you can hang them from the top or you can hang them from the bottom and get the same outcome, then the theory fails, because just geometrically isn't consistent.
This block of wood here is representative of that tube I had. That's the lever. It is extra wide, but that's just to make it more visually not appealing, but visually you can see what's going on clearer by making it a bit wider. But the same rules apply whether it's that wide, narrow, or just a thin bar. So
that's another question where you get to say, well, maybe the same rules don't apply, because if the fulcrum is bigger than the width of the lever, then maybe a whole different set of rules pop into place. I mean, you're just making statements that, are going beyond not only your competence, but what you can illustrate to be true.
So if this represents the weight hanging down here, vertically down because of gravity, and the same on that side, for all these things we're going to make the weights the same, so we can forget the weights. All we're interested in is the distance from this line of action to the pivot. You can see that they're exactly the same there and there, so it would balance. If we displace this up to that point, and we say we're going to hang the weights from the bottom.
So this is the part where you can see what I attempted to point out, is that in this configuration where you're hanging from the bottom, this side is further than this side, in terms of the distance from the fulcrum. But the fact is that if I did hang it from the top, then this side is closer than this side. The distances. So this one's further in one case, closer in the other case. So it's exactly the opposite, which means obviously the lever couldn't behave the same. But the fact is it does behave the same. And so that pretty much says that theory can't exactly be the explanation.
The tube. You can see here, you've got the arm is the width of this disc, which is the circumference of the lever as it rotates. So a quick inspection here.
So all of that I had talked about in the sense that obviously in a circle what's happening is as you're going up the circle, you're doing more changing in the vertical direction here and more changing in the horizontal direction up here, and that makes the shape of the center of the mass of some object placed somewhere on that wheel. It means it's going to be doing different things at different times through the motion. And there's a difference between moving something sideways and moving something up or down into gravity.
The distance there is the width of the disc. But down here, you can see that, if I put it like that, you can see it's a much narrower distance now, as opposed to that. So because this is if it's hung from the bottom. So because this is the greater arm, it's going to experience a force down like that. And then, because it would be reversed, this distance now is greater than this distance. So it would oscillate back to and fro until it damped down. Now then you was complaining, it doesn't work because what if it's from the top? Well, let's do that and we'll see. Now we're going to hang the weight from the top corner of the...
So he's going to point out exactly what I said, which is, oh yeah, that is opposite.
Tube. And now let's have a look at it. Remember that, you've got that sort of distance there. But over here, it's reversed. We've got a much longer arm now. So the force now is not to restore it to the horizontal. The force now is to make it continue in that sense. Which is what would happen, what does happen. And in fact, it tends to...
Okay, so let's just say, okay, he's making his argument. He's saying it in fact happens. Again, he's going to basically break the rule, okay, of the concept, which is you do the same thing. You hang the mass. You don't glue the mass. You hang the mass. So again, so I showed it in the Chevrolet video. They hung the masses where the force is on the top of the lever. Okay, so, and it did balance. It didn't just whirl in a circle.
turn over. We would demonstrate that. Exactly the same, you'd measure the forces with...
So again, nowhere did I ever suggest zip tying masses to levers or any of this crap. This is all his own interpretation of what I said or what I modeled or what I suggested, and I never drew the lever with other than hanging objects on it. So again, this is just such bullshit.
Weights stuck to the rod without dangling. You do the same idea. If they're now above this lever, and we do that.
Right, but if they're below it, it doesn't happen whether it's top or bottom. So if you're just hanging the weights from these positions, the two hanging from the top won't be any different than hanging from the bottom.
The drawing would predict that this weight's got more force because of the longer arm through the centre of mass than this one. So it should go down. Let's see. It does. It turns up.
Right, and so what you're really doing is just changing the fact that you lifted the weight, now you're moving the weight sideways. You're not moving the weight into gravity anymore. But anyway.
Over the weights will want to hang.
Exactly, they want to hang below the fulcrum. So if as long as the weights are below the fulcrum, okay, it will balance. And you can't stop it from balancing. So all you have to do is, it's not about where you're applying the pressure, it's where the weights actually are is the part that matters, where the mass actually is. The center of these two masses has to be below the fulcrum or it's unstable if it's above the fulcrum. That's the key fact that's controlling the effect.
Beneath the pivot point. So in either case, that's how you would work it out with that drawing. I hope you like that.
So again, this snarky bullshit. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's just he's going to pretend he went to lever school or balance school and acquired some knowledge of how these things function. If there was any training video on the subject, then I guess we'd all be experts. But there isn't any such shit. Oh, God, these people are so obnoxious. Let's see what he says. Exactly. LOL. The moron has had a year or two to figure this out. Figure what out? What does this have to do with kinetic energy, by the way? What the fuck does this have to do with whether levers conserve momentum or kinetic energy? What does this have to do with you showing us the 5 mass going in one side of the lever 2 units of distance away at 10 velocity and it moving 2 10 masses 5 miles an hour? What does it show that happening? Fuckers. Weights on top, it topples over. Weights in line with axis, it's just balances, no oscillation. Weights below. So again, it's just the weights below part. The center of mass of the weight has to be below the fulcrum or it doesn't do the balancing thing correctly. It oscillates, but you have explained why in the clearest way possible. So again, the why doesn't work, okay? His geometry argument isn't correct. This is great stuff. I mean, this is just such, this is what they think of the science of physics. They're just illustrating exactly why physics is broken. is because people really don't scrutinize this stuff and make sure they got the right answer. But it will still go over her head. So what is this baby talk about her head? What is this crap, you pedophile? What the fuck is this? Pedophile brozo. Okay, so is that what you want me to do? I'll title you Pedophile Brozo? The pedophile clown? I mean, what the fuck is it with you? And this is the great guy, the guy who's so defensive of women. And again, he's using calling a man a girl as an insult. Because, yes, women are so inferior. What man would want to be, referred to as a woman? Because, damn, women are so inferior. You're just such an asshole. God, you duplicitous piece of shit, you lying little weasel. Oh, you care about the reputation of women. Oh, fuck you do. Anyway, nice visual explanation. Thank you. So it was just like what I said. Hanging the weight from the top is the same as gluing it to the top. Oh, okay. I mean, they're just these people are just such pieces of shit. Thanks, mate. Oh, God, I just can't, Thanks for pointing me to this, Michael. So Brozo has to be pointed to these videos. He can't find them on his own. Sorry, just too fun. What channel is it? Oh, he has a channel? Oh. God, it's just so funny. Cool demonstration iron. I like that. So again, this is so tangential. I mean, I can't find the tangential connection to this crap, this argument about oscillation times and all this crap, and how this actually connects to anything like the question of whether levers conserve kinetic energy or whether they conserve momentum. That was it. Okay. Pitiful. Just disgraceful. Just disgusting. Let's just see if I missed anything. No. Disgusting slop. Alright. And, that's all they got. Weasels. Just weaselly, disgusting, weaselly, lying sacks of shit. Alright, so the Julius Sumner. So this was his first lesson. Okay, so maybe I should have taken... Well, it was his first physics video that he did on... This was the idea he thought was really important to get down first. So in that sense, I probably should take it more seriously. But yes, I just thought it was, this isn't very interesting physics, frankly. But okay, to me. But let's play it anyway. So it doesn't have an intro this time. Somehow it got lost. So we'll just... Oh, I have to change the volume. This will be really loud. All right.
Marvelous thing to consider, really, and fantastic in its consequences for the human race. Consider the following. I have here a double track, which is downhill to my left. Here I have a cylinder of wood, which, as you know...
So this is the sort of a fakie, right? Because the two boards are separating with distance. So I talked about how I I played with this a device similar to this. They turned it into a toy, you could call it, and you have to roll a ball, and you get points for rolling it further. Anyway, and it plays with this very concept. And the fact is you can lower something's gravitational mass. That is, you can take advantage of it gaining some energy by dropping something, and then use that energy to force further linear distance. You can convert it by basically pushing it back up, by forcing it back up, by you imposing energy. So you gain the energy from gravity, and then you add even more force, and you end up with even more velocity.
Will go downhill, as any respectable cylinder should do. But here I have another geometrical form, and I put it at the bottom of the plane, And look.
I don't know why he just doesn't explain that. Yes, you can just understand it's got a center of gravity, and frankly, I'm going to be lowering its. I'm going to lower it in real space. It's going to be actually falling instead of rising, because of the fact that the surface is going to contact it at thinner and thinner locations on this center of line.
Lo and behold, it goes uphill. And that's a strange business. Well, friction forces are holding it there. So, you see, it goes uphill.
If I push
And a
it.
proper understanding of this lies in an understanding of center of gravity, an idea we got first from Archimedes in about the 3rd century BC. Consider a stick, a meter stick. If it was a good stick, as I would like to have it, it would have to be uniform, homogeneous, and isotropic. Those are wonderful words to know the meanings of. Supposing the stick weighs 10 pounds, and I support it with 2 fingers like that. It is clear that each finger pushes up with 5 pounds each. 5 plus 5 is 10. The stick weighs 10 down. Indeed, if I move the fingers elsewhere, I still exert 10 pounds up, but in 2 places. Now, can I not find a place such as that right there, where I exert a force of 10 pounds up? And we are then led to say that all the stick is right there, all of it. And that's the center of gravity of...
So that's when physics does things that I just say, okay, that's sort of unnecessary, because we know all the mass isn't right there. So why pretend that that's how it is? That's like the whole point source thing, where they turn a whole object into one point source to make one argument. And those things aren't very useful in terms of breaking other things. So it's like per second, and they say, well, let's just use the squared terminology, unit terminology, for something that's not a square. Per second isn't second squared.
the stick. Incidentally, I could use also the phrase center of mass, and I leave it as an exercise for you and your teachers to find the difference in center of mass and center of gravity. Now,
so usually when they do that, I'll leave that question open to you to research and discover. Means they don't have a good answer. Okay, so, and the answer is just because it's hard to explain that, yes, the center of gravity is not a real place. It's not in the substance itself often, because you just make a half a circle and the center of gravity is going to be somewhere in between. It's not even going to be on the material object.
I said all the stick is here. This suggests that there's no stick here and no stick here. And somebody says, but I see some stick here.
Yeah.
And I say,
it.
all the stick is right there.
Well, it really isn't, but whatever. Go ahead. Say it all you want. That's just your contact point with the whole stick. So, yes, the only part of the stick that says you're touching, that's the part you're touching.
And I could prove it. Let me put a clamp on the stick and support it somewhere remote from the center of gravity. If I do that, the stick tips. Obviously, anybody knows that. But
yeah, but the question is why? Okay, I get it. Okay, it's more gravity on this side than that side. But then I can start adding these weights and do these different things where I can make it so there's much less mass on one side than the other, and it still balances.
if now I put another clamp on the other side and find an appropriate weight here, you will see an astonishing thing, that I can put the stick in equilibrium on the ground that all the weight is at the 50 mark. So
he's saying all the weight is here, all right, and yeah, it is in the sense that there's a center of the mass, okay, because you move this mass closer, you moved it further. There's no mass on the other side. You moved it to a location where this side now weighs the same as this side. From the perspective of this point of the lever, but from other points of view, it wouldn't work So you've matched the center of the total mass of the lever plus the weight to to a center of gravity, and that's the touching point. You're touching the center of gravity. That's, I guess, the way to say it, I think.
On the blackboard, it would look like this. Here is the stick. There is the center of gravity in the geometric center, and I have supported it right here with a weight hanging here. And I say that if we consider all the weight of the stick...
So what he did, though, is he moved the center of gravity here. That's where the fulcrum is. So, you know, this diagram doesn't match what he's saying very well. Okay, so all the weight of the stick is now, because he added this weight, the center of gravity is now over the touching point, the fulcrum. And that's why it balances.
W sub S acting right there, then that weight of the stick times that distance there is equal to this weight times this distance here. And so we can find the weight of the stick without weighing it by assuming all the stick is right there.
All right, so again, it would be, I don't see any value in making those wrong assumptions. We know the weight isn't right there, and there's a nice correlation. This is like Hooke's law. I mean, it's basically telling you that the distance plus the weight is the, you know, that'll tell you how much pressure it can apply, how much momentum.
Now, to prove that you are right when your teacher does this, all you need to do, having done the mathematics, is to put the stick on a platform balance in such a fashion and weigh it. And an astonishing thing is discovered.
So again, that scale is weighing things by putting them on top of a lever. So depending, you know, these lever obviously has stops in it and different things to stop it from swinging around. But the fact is you can use it as a balance, okay, by putting weights on top of what will be the fulcrum of the lever. So it's not. So it's not as Ian wishes to propagandize.
A very astonishing thing. That the
For whatever reason, like I said, it's such a tangential, non-relevant subject.
weight of the stick is exactly what you get, disregarding some little experimental error, exactly what you get by assuming all the stick there. Let's consider it further. Here is an equilateral triangle. If I put a pin through one vertex or corner and hang a plumb line on there, a plumb line is just a string with a bob on the end of it, and such a plumb line is always vertical for the observer at the place in question, and then I draw a line on that triangle, I say that the center of gravity lies somewhere on that line. Proof. Let me do this from another corner, such as, say, this one, which isn't broken. And we see that the plumb lines intersect at a place. This place is the center of gravity of this triangle. All the triangle is right there. Proof. I am going to put my finger right there, and the triangle will remain in a horizontal plane, which was announced by Archimedes, again in the 3rd century BC, in a classical book which he wrote entitled De Aqui Ponderantibus. See, concerning equal ponderousness. You can discuss.
And he meant by weight, by ponderous. He wasn't like pondering it in a thought way. But anyway.
Discuss this with your classmates and your teacher. So, the center of gravity of this equilateral triangle, for those of you who know a little geometry, is at the intersection of the medians, at the intersection of the angle bisectors, at the intersection of the altitudes upon the sides. Reviewing a little bit of Euclidean geometry. Consider another triangle, an isosceles triangle, the center of gravity found in the same way. Or consider an irregular body, center of gravity found in the same way. the intersection of the plumb lines. Of course, the center of gravity of a uniform circular plate would obviously be in the very center. Now, in all of these illustrations, we have found the center of gravity to be where? Where there is some stuff. There's some stuff there. So the question has very intriguing complexion. Because here, if I hang this up and drop a plumb line...
So he could have just done a hoop, you know, and made it really clear that all the mass is on the outside and the center of gravity is still in the center. Blah, 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 blah.
It goes so. If I now drop another plumb line, it goes so. And we see a most remarkable thing. Very remarkable. The plumb lines intersect where there is no stuff. Right in here. And this is the center of gravity of this slab. Moreover, all the slab, all the plate, may be considered to be right here where there is none, which is a most astonishing piece of business. So the center of gravity of a system can be where there is no stuff of the system.
Right, so you can't put your finger there and touch it. So, you know, it's not useful in some respects because you can't get to the center of something's gravity.
This leads me to ask, where is the center of gravity of a donut? The center of gravity of a donut is in the middle of the hole. And if you cut out the middle of the hole, or cut out the hole, I have in my right hand the center of gravity of this donut, which is a very remarkable idea. Now, to show you the consequences of this, let's look at this rolling down business. The uniform cylinder rolls downhill. Its center of gravity is in the geometric center, along the long axis and in the middle. If we measure the height of the center of gravity above the tabletop, which I would call the zero potential plane, measure it there, then measure it down here, we would find that this is lower than this. Accordingly, the center of gravity has gone downhill, which introduces another very...
And the real point is, I suppose you could argue, is the force of gravity is acting on it and the friction isn't sufficient to stop its motion. So it continues to move. And there's going to be more friction if you try to go up the hill.
Fundamental principle, namely, that the energy of a system tends toward less. So this goes downhill. The center of gravity has gravitated downhill. On this one, the center of gravity of this double cone, referred to as a cone of two naps, N-A-P-P-E-S, beautiful geometry established by René Descartes, the Frenchman. The center of gravity of this double cone...
So, again, just pointing out that Descartes and Galileo and Newton did lots and lots of different physics contributions, and they were fairly reliable in what they stated, and you're contending they were fundamentally missing some profound aspect of reality in terms of recognizing this squared energy function.
Lies along this central axis and in the middle of this single base. So when I put the cone here, the center of gravity is so high above the zero potential plane, the tabletop, and where is it now? It is clearly nearer the tabletop. So again, the center of gravity has gone downhill, although it looks as if this is a crazy piece of business, that the cone, stuck a little by friction there, the cone appears to roll uphill. So
it moves a lot slower, blah, blah, blah. Lots of reasons for that, I suppose, too. So combination of friction and the fact that you're sliding it across the surface, not just rolling it, blah, blah, blah.
Center of gravity, very important idea. More of an astonishing nature. Here is a cork stopper.
So this goes to the importance of the weights being below what's considered the fulcrum, or the point that you're creating the contact. So if the weights are below the contact point, it's very stable. If they're above it, it's very unstable.
Here is a cork stopper with a pin in it, and there's the head of the pin. Here is another cork stopper with a pin in it, and that's the point of the pin. And if I put these point to head in this position, if I can find that position here, and let go, obviously it will not stay stably. It will tip over. Why? Because the center of gravity is above the point of support, a condition that is not good for equilibrium. So what do I do?
Right, and that's the statement. It's not good for equilibrium. Unfortunately, there's not a statement really explaining it very well, why this is necessary. But I guess the argument would be is that this is where the fact that the gravity does in fact change. The closer you are to the surface of the Earth, the heavier the objects are in fact, and lower than they are when they're higher. And so I guess if you could do this upside down, if you had some so I guess going up won't help, because going down is going to do the same thing, in terms of some way of seeing that if you could reverse the field, then you could see that yes, the forks, it would balance better going the opposite way, because there'd be more gravity.
I put a couple forks in here, in any way whatsoever, and then I put the point of the pin on the head of the pin, and there it is. Let me get this away so it doesn't hit the glass vessel, and we see an astonishing thing. Just look at that. Should not that fall off? It should. But why doesn't it? It does not fall off for this reason. The center of gravity of this system is below the point of support, which is another condition of equilibrium. Here's a good illustration of it. Take this little man, a little metal figure in the shape of a man, who supports himself, you see, on the toe of one foot. And that's fantastic, really. He is very stable. If I tried to knock him off, oh, that just slipped there. That didn't really fall off because of the inadequacy of the center of gravity. Look at that. What must we say? We must say this, that the center of gravity of this man and his rod and the sphere system is below the point of support, which makes him stable. I say the idea of center of gravity is an astonishing one, as I remarked earlier, in its consequences for the human race. Consider this one, more of the same, and I hope you see.
So again, this is why I guess I found the video a little lacking, is it really doesn't explain why that is. Why so unstable above and so stable below?
See that I am injecting into this program some elements of fun and jest, because, as I like to say, the intellectual process is usually very severe, so it needs some fun injected into it to make it a little more palatable.
Oh, I guess that's the invention of the Brozosian theory. Oh, we must have fun because we're children. Hey. Not that I'm incapable of making a joke. It's just that, come on, there's got to be more physics than that in it.
Here is a figure most stable for the same reason.
Same thing.
The center of gravity
Just
below
bigger.
the point of support. Of now fundamental interest to us is such a program as I have here. Consider this block of wood. Square cross-section, cut askew on the bottom. It is so stable. I call your attention to a plumb line that is supposed to be inside at the center of gravity, and that plumb line falls inside the base. Now, let me put another block atop the original. I hope you see what has happened. I have raised the center of gravity and shifted the plumb line to your left, my right, so that the plumb line passes more nearly on the inner edge of the base. The system is now less stable. If now I put another block atop, it is obvious what the consequences are likely to be. The center of gravity has been raised. The plumb.
So this is like it's almost like it's a different argument, because this is so purely gravitational, where you're just putting more mass on the one side of the object, and eventually you get so much mass on one side it has to tip.
The line is shifted further to my right and may indeed fall outside the base. This makes the system unstable, as you will now see. Notice, the slightest displacement is likely to tip it over. So, if a system is stable, as we say in physics, what we mean is this. Any slight displacement from its position of equilibrium will still allow it to return to where it was. If it is unstable, as we have now, because the plumb line falls outside the...
So why it returns is the important point. Where exactly the energy is vibrating or moving or doing its thing to cause this capacity to push the energy in the opposite direction and oscillate, or and eventually reestablish its previous condition. How exactly it does that isn't really explained in this video.
Base, any slight displacement will raise havoc with us. Watch it. And it tips over. You know what I am representing here. I am representing the Tower of Pisa, which I hope you know about historically, and I thought you would like to see a picture of it. In Pisa, in Italy, and I hope one day you will go there to see it for yourself. I say it is a most wonderful thing to contemplate. So, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, we come to the end of our first lesson, let us say, on the great idea of center of gravity, the notion first established by Archimedes. And I thank you for listening.
Anyway, so I guess we'll go back to this Chevrolet thing to finish up and call it a video. Okay, where did I put that? That's somewhere around here. Alright, and we were somewhere in here. This is where they're going to talk about, the gears aren't that important. I guess the important one is where he starts talking about how your speed changes. Okay, so somewhere in here.
We are now in neutral. The gears that are always in mesh are turning over with the engine, but the shaft to the rear wheels is standing still.
So one is, you could almost call it an idler, pulley, or whatever. The other gear is just really being a place for you to make these transitions between different gear ratios that actually do turn the crank, which is the middle gear. But anyway.
A 3,000-pound automobile takes a lot of force to start. So in low speed, we get the greatest leverage by letting the smallest gear on the countershaft.
So the engine's running fast, and we needed to move the tire slow. And so the gear ratio allows for a slow turn of the drive shaft versus the wheel drive shaft versus the engine drive shaft. Blah, blah, blah.
Turn the largest gear on the drive shaft. The engine on this model is running at a constant speed of 90 revolutions a minute. With low gears in mesh, the rear wheel is turning at 30 revolutions a minute, about a third the speed of the engine, but with 3 times the force.
Okay, 3 times. Not 9 times, just 3 times. Just 3, not 9. Just 3.
The power is going through these gears in the transmission.
Clearly, this is a 1950-something video, but anyway.
After we've started the car rolling, we want fast pickup.
Well, the cars in the video, though, they do look 40s. So, damn, it really could be 1939. Well, 1939, yeah, they made The Wizard of Oz in 1939. So, film did get a lot better. All right, never mind. It could be it actually could be 1939.
So we shift into second by sliding the sleeve backward to mesh with this gear on the shaft to the rear wheels.
Yeah, those are definitely 39 cars.
The wheel is now turning at 60 revolutions a minute, and the power flows through these gears.
Yes, this little one to this one. So now the gear ratio isn't as dramatic. Okay, you've got a smaller, bigger gear. Okay, so it's still a bigger gear. It's still 90 to 60, blah, blah, blah.
This Black Music Month, Kit Kat is turning it up for black artists everywhere. From a limited edition look to an exclusive...
I wonder what it would be, White Music Month. I mean, it's sometimes you're just saying, how ridiculous are you going to be? I mean, civilization makes all this effort to, fair up the game and create accountability, and even does this whole affirmative thing, which I'm all for, and all that crap, and then you just go backwards and turn it into segregation all over again by yourself. So you do it. I mean, it's just too silly. Group identity. Just fuck. Too silly.
For higher speeds, we let the power go directly to the rear wheels. We shift the sleeve forward so that it meshes with the shaft from the engine. The power travels straight from the engine to the drive shaft. Now the shaft to the wheel.
So he didn't say anything again in this video like, okay, when we do this, we're getting 100% efficiency and we're keeping all of our energy. But as soon as we connect one of these gears, we start losing a whole bunch of energy. Or guess what? We can sometimes make free energy. Yeah, we can make the wheels get more and more energy by just changing these gear ratios. It's really fun to make free energy. I mean, there's just they're not acknowledging that there's some dysfunction in the gears and they can't do this 3 times the change in the gear, and all of a sudden I don't have 3 times the torque. I only have 2.1.
Is turning at 90 revolutions a minute, the same speed as the engine. But here's a problem. An automobile must be able to go backward.
Okay, so we really don't need to know how, it is a pain in the ass, actually, transmissions to have to figure out how to reverse things. You just got to add crap and blah, 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 and then you have to figure out a clutch, and you got to figure out some way to make it so you don't burn it to pieces, and blah, 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 blah. So it's all interesting stuff to some extent, but yes, it's very dated. All right. So, that's enough. And such. And so forth and whatnot. I mean, I did, what are you going to do? I can't force the naysayers and nitpickers and rude, obnoxious privacy invaders that what their obligation is to draw what I draw and then explain where I made a mistake in what I draw. So if I draw a lever and explain it conserves momentum, they are supposed to show me how it doesn't conserve momentum. And they won't do that, Pierrot. They'll just rag and make, insulting, derogatory comments on other people's videos without showing us their brilliant explanation. Anyway, so so we'll leave that as it is and move on. Blah 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 blah.